Peter Tafa, and I see a whole lot of other incredible people joining this morning. Thank you again for joining, and it's indeed a pleasure to have you. So we get straight into the conversation. Maybe before we do that, I will give 2 minutes each to each of our resource persons. I have done a very brief introduction of them, but it would be good to hear from them who they are and what they do. For those just joining, thank you. Continue to use the chat box, put in your name, where you're joining from, and of course, let us know what you're hoping to learn today. So I'll start with Prof. Prof, please introduce yourself to those that are meeting you for the first time.
Thank you very much. My name is Chukwumerije Okereke. I am the director of the Center for Climate Change and Development at Alex Ekwueme Federal University in Dufalike, Nigeria. I am also, as you said, the coordinating lead author, IPCC, Working Group 3, Chapter 1, on Introduction and the Framing. And I am a visiting professor at University of Reading and University of Oxford, where I teach on climate governance on a number of different modules. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Prof. I can't thank you enough for making time to be a part of this. Thank you and welcome. Mr. Ochuko, I'll pass the mic to you. If you would introduce yourself, please.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Ochuko Odibo, and currently I'm at the Nigerian Agribusiness Group as the head of segment for climate smart agriculture. Previous works in the Ministry of Environment as special advisor to several ministers of environment, projects of REDD+, Green Bonds, and a couple of other projects with the Ministry of Environment. Currently at the Nigerian Agribusiness Group, we're working with the Ministry of Agriculture, designing a framework for climate smart agriculture in Nigeria. So more of that will come. I hope some of us here will be there with us as we toe that line. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Ochuko. The next is Habiba Daggash. Habiba, it's good to have you. Welcome. Please introduce yourself. If you can have your video on, that would be great for all the speakers. Great.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the introduction, Sheyi. My name is Habiba Ahut Daggash. I'm currently an associate with RMI's Africa Energy Program. RMI is a US-based nonprofit looking to advance market-driven solutions to clean energy. By background, I have a PhD in energy systems engineering and energy systems modeling, where my PhD really focused on understanding sustainable energy transition pathways to deliver the Paris Agreement and net zero for Nigeria and the UK.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Habiba, for joining. Ken Henshaw, not the least, welcome. Please introduce yourself, my senior comrade.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning to all. My name is Ken Henshaw. I work with a non-governmental organization called We the People. We the People is based in the Niger Delta cities of Port Harcourt and Calabar. I'm currently speaking to you from the Calabar office of We the People. I have at least 20 years experience working around climate change and environmental issues, but specifically working in the context of local communities, especially those communities where carbon offset schemes like REDD+ have been implemented and where hydrocarbon pollution has deprived people of livelihoods. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Talking about pleasure being here, I think I have the pleasure of also recognizing the presence of Dr. Peter Tafa. This is someone who handheld me since 2019 when I got into the scene fresh. And he's been there supporting all the works that we do as young people. Quite emotional for me, but I have to say, thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to just give a word or two before we get on with the conversation, that would be appreciated, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure actually to come back to the scene. I have been away for some while as the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Labor and Employment. But I have just retired, so I'm bouncing back onto the environment family, and specifically in the area of climate change. So it's a great pleasure to see the momentum and the tempo that has been built. I have tried while I was in labor to bring about the issue of just transition and green pathways in job creations. And I have been able to sensitize the Nigerian Labour Congress to come on board very strongly to bring cooperation between them and the International Labour Organization too. So it's a pleasure to be back, and we'll be conversing as we go along. Have a great day.
Absolutely, thank you again. And this will always be home for you. So let's get on with the conversation. What does net zero mean for Nigeria? Prof, I know you're a prof, very academic, but let's see, if you had to break this down to me, like I'm a primary one child or student, how would you define net zero to me?
An easy definition would be that it is about reaching a state where the amount of carbon dioxide emissions that we put into the atmosphere is equal to the amount that we remove from the atmosphere. So removing equal amount of CO2 emissions from atmosphere as we have released into it is what gets you to a net zero. The confusion sometimes comes from when people focus on the zero and not the net. So they say, oh, Prof, does it mean that we will not be emitting any other form of carbon dioxide emission? And the answer is not. It is still possible in a net zero scenario that you are emitting CO2 because there are heavy industries like iron, like steel making, transport like aviation, like shipping, that are very, very difficult to decarbonize. The same applies to road haulage. They're very hard to completely electrify. So you would still have a situation where you are emitting CO2, but you are also having to remove so that, as I said, the equation balances to zero. But it's also important to distinguish between, sometimes people say net zero CO2 emissions, other people say net zero greenhouse gas emissions. So you have to bear in mind that those two things mean different things, because when you're talking about CO2, then you're really talking about mostly carbon dioxide emission. But if you're talking about net zero greenhouse gas emission, then that means something slightly different. The same equation applies, but now you're also interested in net zero of methane and all other greenhouse gas emissions. But often some people will use carbon dioxide equivalent, which means they are still talking about all greenhouse gas, but then they have indexed it to carbon dioxide. So that's a simple answer. I think you want to make it conversational. So
yes,
I'll stop to bring in other people. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. And the next person I'll bring is Ken Henshaw. This is someone who works in the Niger Delta region. Many times he talks about the damage that has been done because of all of these extractive activities. And while that is, clear enough, some of us have also had to think around the reality that we must develop as a country. And so it's been sometimes really tricky to balance that conversation. Ken Henshaw, Prof has just simplified to us what net zero means. He's made it clear. It's not about we not, progressing, we're not producing. We have to do all of that. So bring it on. What's your thoughts around how do we achieve net zero? I mean, the possibilities of achieving net zero with the people and the planet in mind. How do you respond to that?
Thank you so much, and thank you, Prof, for that excellent, very well simplified definition of net zero.
Oh my gosh! Shut the fuck up! No one cares.
Okay, so it's a very controversial concept, net zero, right? And so, if you understand the concept very properly, it's good for us.
My apologies. I think we've been spammed. Olumide, if you can keep an eye on who is coming in and remove any spammer, that would be great, please.
I will do that. Thank you.
Henshaw, please.
Yes, so I was saying, good for us to interrogate the concept of net zero. And in interrogating that concept, you know, the word we need to, you know, watch out for and look at critically is the word net. What does net mean? Why didn't we just have zero carbon emissions? Why net zero? Like Prof has explained, right? Net zero simply means taking away as much as you emit. So if you emit 100, you take away 100. That's net zero, creating an equation, a balance between emissions, pollution, and taking away that pollution. The bottom line about net zero is that net zero is dependent on this, you know, the same offset scheme, you know, carbon offset scheme. And carbon offset scheme are mostly driven by market mechanisms. And being somebody who works in the context of local communities, I can tell you for free what market-driven offset schemes actually mean, you know, for local communities. Maybe at some other time I'll talk about REDD+, but I can tell you that the whole idea of net zero is that the global north will establish carbon offset schemes, mostly in third world countries, in the global south, to take away carbon emissions, which principally originates from the global north. That is the reality. A lot of people like Nemo Bassi have argued that the whole concept of net zero is a do-nothing concept. It's a concept that allows us to continue on the same development paradigm. And you did, I mean, you called it progress, we still make progress. No. The idea of net zero is we continue on the same development paradigm, which is consumption of fossils, extractivism, the destruction of the planet, in the hope that our pollution will somehow be offset by net zero schemes that we put in place.
Excellency, I am serving Idowu this morning. Idowu, you are boy.
Prof, I will meet Prof. Prof, please. Prof, mute your mic.
I just muted that. Henshaw, if you can just round off on that thought. So
yeah, so you have asked how will we get to implement net zero in Nigeria. I don't think that what we need to start to think about in Nigeria is the implementation of net zero or the realization of net zero. I think we have a fantastic opportunity to develop on a different path altogether. And that's something I'd like to shed more light on shortly.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm bringing next on board Habiba Daggash. Habiba, can you hear me? Let me be sure you can hear me first.
Yes, I can hear you very clearly.
Awesome. We were together in Glasgow for COP, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? You were at COP?
Yes, I was.
Great. And just 10 days after that conference was concluded, you wrote an article that I think was very controversial. Bold statements you made, and you were clear even from the very first sentence of that article. You said clearly, Nigeria should not have joined the race to net zero. And listening to Ken Henshaw, it seems like you're on the same path. Do you really think, I mean, put it in context for us, Nigeria shouldn't have signed the race to net zero. Is it that it's not a priority for us, or how exactly do you mean?
Yeah, so very quickly, I'm just going to share a slide very quickly to guide the points that I'm going to discuss. So the first thing is in terms of how did we come up with this idea of net zero? Let me just put this. And the idea is that it has come from, sorry, I just need to hide.
We see your screen. Just
see my screen clearly?
Yes, and it is clear enough, so you can proceed.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of how did we come up with this net zero number, and typically net zero by 2050? You know, the IPCC, which the professor is part of, you know, does these every 5 years, does these assessment reports where they review the existing literature from climate modelers, climate science, and assessing what is the emissions trajectory that the world is on today, and what does that mean in terms of the amount of global warming that we're going to get at the end of the century. So in their most recent assessment report, the report on 1.5 degrees, to be able to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees as is outlined in the Paris Agreement, really for the different pathways that they considered, so P1 to P4, which consider different rates of societal and technological change, regardless, you need to be able to drive down emissions so quickly that they reach zero around 2050 or 2055. So that is kind of the foundation that for the Paris Agreement to ever be realized, the entire world, the net emissions, so like was described, both the emissions being produced and what is being then removed either through engineered or natural means, needs to be zero and even become negative thereafter. I think sometimes people think net zero is just the ambition, but in all of these scenarios, emissions go negative after, which involves a different set of technologies to get negative. So that's the scientific backing for this number. And this is something that the world needs to achieve. I think in terms of the article that I've written and the position that I've articulated is that for a country like Nigeria, what would this mean to be able to meet net zero on the same time scale that maybe countries in the global north are advocating for, or the IPCC seems to be advocating for? If you look at Nigeria's historic emissions, they're actually not particularly significant compared to other countries of a similar size and economic development. But the business as usual scenario would lead to an almost doubling of emissions by mid-century, so by 2050. However, to be able to drive down to net zero, you can see the significant difference in the emissions trajectory that needs to be pursued from business as usual and net zero. And the reason I've been so skeptical about the concept of net zero is because it's constantly been advocated that we do this on the similar timescale the developed countries are doing that. And it is yet to be proven that you can pursue the same level of economic development at the same rate while keeping your emissions intensity down. So that is where my skepticism comes from. We can get into the nitty-gritty of kind of what a net zero pathway means for energy systems transitions and practically investment on the ground. But I just want to anchor that this is how different the two scenarios are, the pathway that Nigeria is on and what net zero would require us to do. And it would mean having to pursue a development trajectory alongside also driving down emissions intensity, which is something that is yet to have been achieved by a developing country that's similar to Nigeria.
Great. I'm just going to pass the mic on to Mr. Ochuko, Odibo. Thanks for that presentation and for putting it pictorially very clear and easy to digest. Thanks indeed. Ochuko, more or less, if there's anyone among us, the resource person who is closer to the government, who has advised the governments, even from the top level, at ministerial level, to different projects that the government has been taking, do you really think, looking at the background from everyone, would you really say that a net zero projection is still possible? And if it should be a priority at all in the first place?
All right, thank you, Seyi. And I'm very happy you were able to articulate my role here, because when I got the invitation, I was wondering, what will I be saying after Prof has spoken? But I've been opportune to have a unique set of skills. I have joined Dr. Tafa, and Dr. Tafa, good morning. I was part of the negotiating team for a long time, 2007 to recently, and also opportunity to work in projects like Red Plus, designing green bonds, etc. Also advised, starting from Halima Tayo Alawo, John Ode, worked with Amina Mohammed, and then also recently the Minister of State, It's been a wonderful ride, and I've seen different aspects of it. I've seen the negotiation angle, the UNFCCC, and at Lima, where we were to stop Red Plus, Nigeria made an intervention which was able to allow the UN continue funding Red Plus worldwide.
Can you hear me?
Thank you for joining. Olumide, you are muted.
Oh,
I'm sorry, Ochuko, you have to unmute, sorry. Great, yes.
Okay, so sitting down to negotiate at the UN level, coming down to the field to drive projects, then advising at policy level has given me a different view of how this whole thing works. And my thinking is, Henshaw, we were together in Akwa Ibom, and I told you this, we mustn't continue arguing when the rest of the world is moving on. I think we can move on and all of this will work. Although I have a presentation, I don't know if I'm going to have the opportunity
Absolutely.
to show us.
Yes, yes,
yeah.
you will.
But
okay.
We will not need to design a car to drive an electric car. We can as well buy one while we learn how to design it. We mustn't stop eating or farming because we want to reduce emissions. There are ways we can continue to farm and do our agriculture, or even our gas, oil and gas, and make it sustainable. So I think net zero is possible. Net zero is a way to go for us to achieve our NDCs and even more for our country. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. You would make the presentation in a few minutes. But this is really getting interesting. But as we move on, I just want to say thank you to everyone that has just joined. Welcome indeed. This is the first of the series, Net Zero series we call it. And the conversation is around what does Nigeria need? I mean, the possibilities of Nigeria achieving the net zero altogether, and what's the pathway to achieving that? What does net zero mean for Nigeria? And my guests, my resource persons, today includes Professor Okereke, Professor Chukwumerije Okereke, the Director for the Center for Climate Change and Development at FUNAI. And also I have Mr. Ochuko Odibo, who is the head of segments, CSA Nigeria Agribusiness Group. He just spoke now. I also have Ken Henshaw, the Director of We the People. And the lady among us is Dr. Habiba Daggash. She's an associate at RMI Africa Energy Programs. We just made a bit of background introduction as to, net zero, what it means. I should also mention that we have Dr. Peter Tafa, the past director for the Department of Climate Change, also joining us. Pretty much listening, but they will be jumping in from time to time to give comments. So I should also say thank you to everyone that has joined. We really appreciate that you took out this time to join and to learn. And we hope that at the end of this conversation, you can really know for yourself, what does net zero mean for Nigeria? What's the practicality of achieving it? And what are the respective roles that we can play in our respective fields of work? That said, I will go back to Professor Okereke. Prof, you started the conversation. You analyzed, you simplified the big concept of climate, of net zero as it is. And you've seen the conversation drift from the possibilities to the questions around the practicalities, to what it means to development, and the reality, if indeed it is possible. The funds, where will it come from? The technology transfer, how is it possible? Odibo was saying, we can learn how to build a recyclable, renewable cars, but we definitely can use one in the meanwhile. So I'm coming back to you to ask this question. You've also been part of this negotiation. Do you really think there is an unfair trend in the way this conversation goes? Sometimes it feels like developing countries, Nigeria in context, are being gagged to just jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, we will sign this, we will be a part of this, we will achieve net zero by 2060, even when we know practically that there are questions we must answer. So I'm coming back to ask you, Prof, do you think, looking at the trend, Do you think this at all should be a priority for Nigeria at this time?
Well, thanks very much, Seyifunmi, for bringing me back. I've listened to the other speakers, and I also want to really recognize their expertise and depth on this matter. For me, it's also a privilege to be sharing the platform with my brother Ochuko Odibo and Habib and Ken. I think that I have sympathy with the position that Habiba outlined, which is that it is important for our country, Nigeria, to ensure that they are not being stampeded into some kind of net zero target. But I am ultimately in favor of the position where Ochuko Odibo landed, which is that it is important Nigeria be part of the conversation, and indeed also sets out a net zero target. There is a difference between having a net zero target and being stampeded into having one. So if you are setting out a net zero target because you've been asked to do so, somebody else has given you the time frame, then that is wrong. But if you are joining the net zero target because you understand that it is important for you to do so, then that is right. And that also means that you reserve the right to decide for yourself what is your time frame and how the path that you want to take to reach there. Listen, Nigeria is one of the most climate challenged country in the world. We are among the top 10 most vulnerable countries to climate change. According to a number of different modeling, sensitivity analysis that have been done there, Nigeria may already be losing up to 100 million per year as a result of climate change. And some estimates suggest about...
Sorry, I'll just jump in to be clear. 100 million in dollars or naira?
In dollars. I think I have the, let me bring the 100 billion rather, 100 billion, not 100 million, 100 billion. So let me just share the slide very quickly and I'll take it down again. Do I have the chance to do so?
Yes, yes, please, you can.
Okay. So can you see the slide?
Great. Yes, we see it.
So this is 100 billion rather US dollars per by 2020. This equals to about 15 trillion. And by 2050 it's about 460 billion. And these represents about between 6 and 30% of Nigerians' GDP. This is based on the modeling done by DFID, and I think that Dr. Peter Tafa was actually very much in the Ministry of Environment when this modeling and work was done. So he can come in at some point. It's great to have him back here with us. So it is beyond question that Nigeria should be absolutely engaged and trying to support and to play a leadership role in tackling climate change. At the same time, Nigeria's oil is vulnerable to climate change. If other countries make a movement to the net zero and Nigeria says, oh, I'm going to continue to do business as usual growth, then the question is who is going to buy your oil? We have over 32 countries now that have signaled that they will not be allowing oil-powered vehicles in their jurisdiction from anything from 2042 to 2050. And so the question is, where will you sell your oil? But it is also important to realize that this transition, and this is the slide that shows the sort of risks that are estimated cost of transition risks in Nigeria from 2015 to 2030. You have nearly 100 billion in stranded assets, 3.5 billion in cost of replacement of infrastructure, and possible increase in oil and gas debts, etc., not thinking about job losses. So the transition poses a huge risk for Nigeria as well. So to do nothing and say, oh, I'm going to continue with business as usual approach is actually committing Nigeria to unimaginable chaos and debt and problem. However, we also have to be realistic about the financial cost. If you look at the energy transition plan produced by McKinsey, I think somebody already references here, their conservative estimate is $10 billion per annum, about $400 billion by 2050 to achieve this sort of plan that they set out. And this is also suggesting about the electrification of our economy, about 97% of electric use vehicle uptake, something that you can clearly see is very difficult for Nigeria to achieve between now and 2040, if you think about where we are in terms of technological advancement. So I think that it is as much damaging to set up a net zero target that you cannot meet as it is damaging to not set up a net zero and say, I'm going to go business as usual. The wise thing to do is something somewhere in between, which is set a net zero target that is realistic. Actually, if you look at the LTV plan, which is government's own plan, what they did say is that they want to achieve 50% reduction by 2050 rather, and net zero by 2100. So the pledge that was made by Buhari, our president, is quite ambitious and actually undercuts the LTV by nearly 50 years. However, this can still be a great plan if there is a good intention, a well thought out plan to achieve it. My problem is not that we have a net zero target. My problem is that we are not setting our house in order to achieve to do the massive technological investment, the international bargaining and negotiation that is required to draw down the billions of dollars, and the technology transfer that is required to aggressively pursue the net zero. The problem is not in the ambition, it's in the planning.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. This is getting really interesting. And I mean, people listening, thank you again for joining. Feel free to use the chat box as much as you want to. If there are questions you have, if there are comments you have, if there are thoughts coming to your mind and you just want to put it out there, please do that using the chat box, and I'll be happy to read it. Thanks for joining. I see people joining from all parts of the world, different parts of Nigeria, Kaduna, Lagos, some in the UK, some in the US. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And again, I should also say, apologies for those spamming earlier. We've been able to at least rectify that right now. Annie from Germany, thanks. Kama from Italy, thank you so much, everyone that is joining. I should also say, feel free to take this conversation online through the various social media platforms. The hashtag is #NetZeroNG, #NetZeroNG. I'll put it in the chat box so you can make your tweets, make your post about it, and we'll just track using that hashtag, and we can engage with you as you post that. That said, I'm coming back to Ochuko. I know you have a presentation. If you are able to do that in, say, in another 7 minutes, that would be great. if you are able to put up that presentation and share with us in 7 minutes so that I can come back to Prof. I know he has to leave by 12, but we can just take your presentation quickly, the implication for net zero, the implication for Nigeria. So let's get that presentation from you as quick as we can and come back to Prof. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seyi.
Yes, we can see your slide. So
you can see the slides?
Absolutely,
okay,
yes.
So Prof has said a lot, and I'm going to say he has actually presented my presentation. So I'm just going to run through it. I believe 7 minutes will be fine because I will not have to repeat what Prof has said. In my presentation, I try to simplify as much as possible from my perspective and information. So here we're going to look at what net zero is, why is it important to Nigeria, and all of that, climate change. So this is the main reason why it's important to us. One of the main reasons is we've involved ourselves. We've signed and ratified the Paris Agreement. There's no going back on that. We're not going to pull a Donald Trump on anybody and pull out of the UNFCCC. So said, apart from the Nigerian challenge taken from Prof, Nigeria is being squeezed from both ends. Sea level rise from the south and then desertification from the north, and some other issues, developmental issues. So we must do climate change. We know that already. All right.
Your slides are not changing, Ochuko.
They are not?
Not.
Oh. Did it change now?
No, not yet. Could there be some technical errors? We're just in the first slide. We can't see you change.
Okay.
While you try to fix that, oh yes, I think it's working now. So why just before you go on, I want to say thanks again to everyone that has joined. This is the first of the series. What does net zero mean to Nigeria? And we're grateful to have with us 4 resource persons, experts in their own field, from Professor Okereke to Ochuko, Odibo, Ken Henshaw, and Habiba, Daggash. We've set the stage as to what net zero means, and now we're having conversations around what the practicalities of achieving it in Nigeria. Just wanted to give that background for those that are just joining. Back to you, Ochuko, please.
So yeah, has it changed now?
Yes, so we're on slide 3 now. You can go on. Okay,
so Prof has said this already. It's a balancing game on amount of emissions in the atmosphere being released by any country and the amounts being taken out. I'll try to simplify it as we go. But countries and individuals, we all play a role to tackle climate change. And it's the top on our agenda in Nigeria. And the way we can help to do this is to reach net zero. And the UK became the first major economy to set a target. And I think our target, although it seems ambitious, but I'll tell you there's a trick to all of this. And I'm going to share the trick with everybody to let us know that we can achieve this. It's simple. We all know that the agreement says somebody's going to give us money and all of that. And myself, Dr. Tafa, and the rest of the negotiating team spent years and years reading all through the articles and all the promises from the world to say this will happen. But good. The thing now is, why is this net zero important to Nigeria? And what's the implication for us? It is important because it's the best, simplest way for not just reducing, the activity to reduce is different. It's reporting back. What we do in the next decade to limit emissions and meet Nigerians' NDC conditional commitment of 20%. I'm not going to the unconditional yet, which is ambitious. But there's 7 sectors, 7 key sectors that have been selected are possible to help us meet our targets if we work together. Now, this is the picture a lot of people don't like seeing, our flaring, our gas flaring. There's a Dr. Fodeke, Dr. Tafa used to call this burning our money.
I'm jumping in again to say your slide hasn't changed again. We're still on slide 3.
Oh my.
And we want to see that picture of our money burning. Okay, yes, there you are, slide 7. Go on, please.
Okay, yeah, so I think we might need to, anyway.
Yes, we can see you. You can proceed now.
Okay. So we depend on this gas. Oil and gas for now is our mainstay. We have a lot of other things we do, but gas is ours. Now, I will tell you this, I will share this. I used to work in one of the oil companies in my early days, my heydays, and my expertise as an engineer was to gather gas to use for Nigeria. Net zero means achieving a balance, like I've said. Explaining it like a 2-year-old, Isheyi, it's like turning in water on your bathtub and removing the block. So as the water is going out, more water is coming in. That was the simple explanation. I don't know, maybe you saw my slides before I put it together. So you turn on water and it's flowing into your bathtub, then you pull the plug, then water is going out. So it doesn't mean you don't have water, right? But it also means that the water is going, you're not going to have a flood. So while you are still doing your oil and gas, you're still getting money from the oil and gas sector to develop infrastructure that will help you reduce emissions. And I'll tell you this, it's already started. We are doing this already. I'll give you an example. Recently, a lot of projects were approved, like the railway, for instance, from Lagos to Ibadan. It's there. A lot of people now go to Ibadan, to Ede in Osun State by rail. Now, those people would have been traveling by road, but emissions have been reduced. The issue now is, did we calculate that emissions that was reduced? I don't think we did. Now, reaching net zero applies the same principles. It requires a balance of wherever you were emitting before, then you do a project that helps you reduce that emissions. And believe me, like I said, it's not only the oil and gas sector. We have waste and all of that. So I put here a sample of what the Nigerian government has donned our new flag. This is
You're still on slide 7, by the way, if you want to click to change your slides.
So I don't know why it's doing that, but
I see Mohammed Isa advised me if you can put it on a slideshow, if that works. But we can see slide 8 now. We can see slide 8. And you have about 2 minutes to round off. It's from the 7.
Okay, so we have these sectors that has been selected, and for the NDCs, it's going to cost us a lot, like Prof said. And if you see my next slide, I don't know if you're seeing it, it's going to cost us a lot of money and to do this, which is okay. But if we want to climate-proof Nigeria, and we take industry, transport, infrastructure, water, forestry, these key sectors to decarbonize, I will tell you, all we need to do is have the methodology for calculating the GHG inventory. If we can do this, a lot of work is going on in the agricultural sector. A lot of work is going on in the oil and gas sector. Right now, Nigeria is developing an LPG program. We are developing a CNG, a compressed natural gas program, to power vehicles and factories and trucks in Nigeria. Yes, it's ongoing. And you might not have this information, but this information is out there. It's there for every one of us to see if you just look for it. All we need is the Ministry of Environment working with Bureau for Statistics design a GAG inventory methodology to capture projects that are already ongoing under green bonds, similar oil and gas emissions reduction projects under the NNPC, and all of that. The sectors with the highest degree of exposures are those which directly emit significant quantities of greenhouse gases. For example, coal and power. Those which sell products like, cement and produce steel. So these are sectors. Like I said earlier on, we don't need to start producing electric cars. We can buy some while we learn as engineers how to build them. We can. And whilst that is going on, we try to report back. The thing about Nigeria is our reporting back is a big challenge. There are projects going on right now as I speak to you, comparing electric cars to internal combustion engines. Once you know the difference, we can tell the percentage of emissions reduced by these cars or these equipment that we're bringing into country. So just to round up, Nigeria is among countries like Kenya, Bangladesh, India that has set these goals. And believe me, as a developing country, we are going to create jobs for our people. Yes, don't get me wrong, some people will lose their jobs if they don't move with time. So the train is moving, the bandwagon is moving, the world is decarbonizing, and I think we should join the net zero transition program. I will share my slides. I'm sorry, the time is not enough. I will share my slides with the host and make sure it gets to everybody. So I call on all stakeholders. Henshaw, I believe we could talk more and I could explain why I think this is the way to go to meet our targets by 2050.
Great. I'm just going to jump into first to thank you very sincerely, but perhaps it's not only Henshaw you have to call. Probably you'd have to call some folks like, Nimon Basi. You have to call a lot of other people and say, hey, you know what? This is what you need to understand. And it will be tricky considering the realities of some people. But thank you very much. I'll pass the mic back to Prof. I know Prof has to leave any moment from now. For those just joining, Professor Chukwumerije Okereke is one of our resource persons, one of the IPCC contributor, and the director for climate change at FUNAI. Prof, you said something that I thought was really prominent, and I see a number of people also put it in the chat box. Christopher Jonadab also echoed the very point you made, that the problem is not in Nigeria having a net zero target. It is in we putting our house in order.
Correct.
Now, I mean, the ministers, the government are not here, but just imagine you were in a room with probably 10 of the Nigerian ministers that, whose work relates to climate change. Minister of Environment, Agri, Transport, Science and Tech. You're in a room with these people. How would you tell them? I mean, what would be your guideline for putting our house in order?
Good question. Sorry, I have to run very soon to a funeral service. This is a very fascinating conversation. I would have very much loved to be able to stay to the end. Look, the first thing that they have to understand is that the world can never remain the same again. The world is changing, to use Odibo's phrase, but I think I made a similar point. It is often seen as a cliche, but it is important to realize that we didn't run out of stone. The Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stone. All over the world, if you travel, you see massive investment that is going on now in research and development, in the innovation, in all manner of places. Countries have strategically positioned themselves to capture value from a new world that is already fast emerging. In the US, for example, the green sector accounts for the fastest growing sector employing more people now than the oil and gas sector. So the first thing that the Nigerian government in the table with me, around me, must understand is that it cannot be business as usual. It's impossible to be. The question that they need to focus their mind is, how do we play? How do we capture value? How do we position ourselves to take advantage of what is a moving trend so that we do not end up being really shafted and further disadvantaged and further impoverished by this transition that is already happening? And the first thing that they need to do, the third thing rather they need to do, is to set their house in order. So what does that mean? We already have a Climate Change Act. For goodness sake, this puts us in among the elite group of countries that have set a national framework, legal framework on climate change. I would need someone to explain to me why that is not being implemented. This is a framework that brings various ministries together. We also have the CBN. We have the National Security Advisor because of the security implication of this problem. We have the CBN because of the financial implication. Brings them together to come together and reason among themselves under the leadership of the president, or given the Minister for Environment a huge platform to be able to work with the president to mainstream climate change into the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Industry, Power, etc. Why is this not being implemented? So the first thing I will tell them is, go back and implement the Climate Change Act. Number two, bring the best brains in your country that understand this problem and understand how you can turn it into a money-making machine, green money-making machine. How you can synergize between taking action on environment and building sustainability. Lagos is one of the most polluted cities in the world. And we know that there is a strong relationship between carbon pollution and debt. We know that you can produce more value in agriculture by greening. We know you can give more energy access to people in rural communities through distributed energy, through hybrid forms of energy. We know that this is also a way of further democratization of the country when energy access is now passed on to the rural communities, not through the national grid, but through distributed forms of energy. There are many ways through which you can turn the action on climate change into a sustainable development opportunity. So they need to get the best brains. This is not politics as usual. Otherwise, this country is going to be sinking further and further. They need, regardless of race, regardless of religion, the people like Habib, who have done energy modeling work at the highest level in Imperial College. Why are they not in Nigeria serving our country? Why are we not creating the best enabling environment for them to be home and be working with the best minds to say, this energy modeling pathway is going to get us to net zero by this time. This is the cost. This is the technology. Why are we not making effort to ensure that we have the best brains tackling this problem? And then we need to make sure that we stop seeing climate change as an issue of environment. This is not an environmental issue. In the worlds that are making progress, in the countries that are making progress, they have the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Technology, Ministry of Innovation, Ministry of Businesses, really putting their heads into tackling this problem. This is the way to go. And I have always called for a national strategy on green growth as a foundation to think more imaginatively about how we need to position our investment. And we need to also get the best minds to negotiate with the international community to be able to set our house in order to draw down the significant funding, but also to make the investment in the universities and innovations and other niches in order to develop the technology required to solve this problem. Nigeria will not go anywhere if we say, okay, we're going to go change from oil and gas to renewable, and then we have to import 100% of the renewable from China or from Germany. That is not the green growth that I am preaching, and that will put Nigeria in the right way. That's more impoverishment. It's moving from frying pan to fire. So we need to build the technology, we need to cultivate innovation, we need to set institutions in order, and we need to play the politics right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. I mean, I'm pretty much clueless as to how to respond after listening to you, but perhaps the simplest thing to do would be to ask Habiba Daggash to bring on a presentation and make it make sense. Yes. So Habiba Daggash, if you can bring on that presentation, complete it, and make it make sense to us, all that Prof has said. While you do that, I'm going to say thank you again to everyone that has joined. What does net zero means to Nigeria? That's the conversation we're having now. And we're not just having it in this platform, we're also taking it online. So feel free to I'm taking notes here. You see me with my pen and my paper. I'm taking notes and also learning a lot. So as you learn, feel free to share what you're learning with people on various social media platforms. Use the hashtag #NetZeroNG. I've put it in the chats. And with that, we can track and also keep the conversation going. Professor Okereke just spoke and he has to run for a funeral, but thank you so much, Prof, for those thoughts and for sharing with us. We can't thank you enough. I'll quickly pass it back to Habiba Daggash. The floor is yours. If you can just carry on with the presentation, say in another 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Sheyi. I'll try and be brief. So just picking up on the responses to some of my earlier comments, I want to make a distinction between not being in favor of net zero as a framing for addressing climate change and not being in favor of pursuing decarbonization action entirely. I think those are two different things. Whereas I feel like climate change is an issue, the climate has already changed, as the professor and everybody else has reflected on some of the challenges that Nigeria has faced because of climate change, sea level rise, disruptions to agriculture, etc. What I'm saying is that when you commit to a framing such as net zero, it is very easy to be held to that framing. And when there is a lack of planning underlying your commitment to net zero, as Prof referred to, when we have committed to a target without understanding the changes to technology, to infrastructure, to institutions, to regulation, to policy that is needed to deliver that net zero, then you risk being held to a standard that you cannot meet, quite simply. And that's what I've tried to repeatedly highlight. A big issue that's always discussed is the idea of moving away from the oil and gas sector and moving away from fossil fuel use within a net zero world. So on this graph, it shows how fossil fuel use actually changes in some of those 1.5 degree pathways that the IPCC have highlighted. It's very obvious that coal has no place in a future that's trying to mitigate significantly against climate change, with it almost being eliminated by 2050. But the picture is slightly different when it comes to oil and gas use, where you actually see that, some natural gas, actually relative to the current levels, from 2020 levels, you could actually see an increase in natural gas use within the energy system, and oil probably about half the use. And I think, so these fuels have a role to play in kind of, even in an energy system or in a world that's keeping us on a 1.5 degree pathway. The question then becomes, who gets to emit these emissions in these scenarios, right? If we're all committing to certain levels of climate change mitigation, what is the role of equity and who has more flexibility in using some of these natural resources compared to others? And my point has been repeatedly that these, particularly natural gas, within the context of the energy sector, still has a lot of utility in terms of delivering a quality of energy service that's needed to drive economic development. Very quickly, I just want to show, this is based on some research I did during my PhD on what is the type of energy system or the type of electricity system that can deliver the level of energy demand that's required in Nigeria going out to 2050. And you can see that at the cheapest cost. And you can see that the system is dominated by a lot of natural gas in the south of the country. And in the north of the country, renewables play an important role, whether that's on-grid and off-grid solar and a lot of hydropower. So you see that to be able to deliver the quality of energy service that's needed to drive economic development, we need to have a wide range of energy resources at our disposal to pursue. When you commit to a framing, sometimes this isn't always the case, such as net zero, we start hearing prescriptions being placed on the kind of financing you can access. For example, if I'm trying to get financing to build a new gas plant, for example, then because we are all on this within this climate change paradigm, that financing becomes so much more difficult to access, despite it being the lowest cost of electricity service that that is available to you within the country, especially when we have domestic gas resources that we can utilize. So the caution that I always bring up when we're discussing net zero is that do not commit to a framing that will require a transition away, such a significant transition away from, in terms of technology and infrastructure, that you end up shooting yourself in the foot, right? The Prof mentioned that green technologies or the green sector is the fastest growing sector in the UK or in the US, in those countries. But why is that? Because of the decades of research and development and the skills availability that exists in those countries, the manufacturing capacity to be able to actually build these new industries in a limited amount of time, right? If we say that Nigeria needs to, so this table is just summarizing for the different sectors, for different energy consuming sectors within the country, what do you need to deliver the NDCs versus what do you need to deliver net zero? Taking power, for example, like the system I showed, natural gas mixed with renewables. But if you see that in the net zero world, the amount of gas you use is significantly constrained, and you need a lot more solar to be able to compensate for that. In transport, we need to leave liquid fuels and move to compressed natural gas. But in net zero, you actually need 80% of your vehicles to be electric. For industry, you kind of have to shift from an reliance on natural gas to relying on hydrogen essentially exclusively after 2030. And for buildings, you have to move away from even the LPG that Prof was discussing. You actually have to abandon that. You have to move to cleaner cooking solutions, whether that's electric or use of biomass and biofuels in terms of cooking. I've highlighted these points to see that even the solutions that we are thinking are kind of renewables or sort of compressed natural gas or LPG and will help us drive down emissions currently, are actually fairly incompatible with net zero. You need to go further to build entirely new industries, such as hydrogen, such as clean cooking, electric vehicles, to be able to kind of meet such a steep emissions reduction pathway. And the question I always reflect on is, do we have the skills, the resources, the capabilities to be able to start moving on that pathway immediately? And if we don't, how much time will it take us to build up that capability to be able to deliver net zero? And secondly, as we are on this pathway, what is everybody else doing, right? Which kind of brings us to this question of equity that I mentioned earlier. We have a principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities built into the framework of the United Nations FCCC, right? The framework of Convention of Climate Change, under which the Paris Agreement was signed. So why are we pursuing the same type of energy transformation or systems transformation that a developed country, for example, like the UK, will pursue to deliver net zero on the same timeline? Because they have a legally binding target to deliver net zero by 2050. So that's my first point. I want to reflect briefly on something the Prof said about kind of how climate change is affecting citizens in Nigeria. We think of climate change typically when we talk about climate change, addressing climate change.
As brief as possible.
Sorry, we talk about addressing climate change, we tend to focus on mitigation. But the truth is that the climate change has already happened, and you need a lot of adaptation to be able to kind of acclimatize or adapt to this new norm, right? Which is that a certain level of warming has already happened. And the best way to adapt is to ensure people actually have decent livelihoods and incomes to be able to deal with some of the challenges, whether that's sea level rise that requires relocation, or whether that's having air conditioning to battle against higher temperatures. You can only do that when you have the income levels to be able to support that. So when we're thinking about how best to allocate resources to deal with climate change, Are we going to focus on building up, focusing on how achieving energy service delivery and economic development as quickly as possible so that people can adapt to this new norm? Or are we going to channel the limited financial resources and institutional capability into building out these new industries that are almost forcing us to reduce emissions at a rate that similar to what developed countries are going to? So why should we put ourselves under that burden and not have the flexibility to choose from the options of technologies and natural resources that we have to develop? So I've left all of these as questions because I think it's worth reflecting on them as we decide what kind of pathway seems better to kind of think about whether net zero is the right framing for Nigeria's climate action.
Awesome, thank you. I mean, I'm really overwhelmed with the quality of this conversation. Thank you indeed, Dr. Daggash, for that very clear, insightful presentation. The next question I want to ask, someone already asked in the group, saying that Richard Abubakar Umar is saying for us to achieve all of this, we need the right political will across board. Prof, did point us in that right direction when it comes to, when I told him to imagine he was in a room with the ministers and probably the president and to give an advice. But he's also asked another question. How are the state governors and local government chairmen carried along to this project? And that brings to mind inclusiveness, people at the ground level. Can Henshaw, you work a lot with people at the ground level. In terms of inclusiveness, if, I know you have a very extreme position, but looking at the way the conversation has gone today, if we really want to work towards this net zero, what would be your recommendation for inclusiveness? How do we include those people at the local level so that they're included or their thoughts is reflected in whatever framework we map out to achieve net zero projection? Can Henshaw, please?
Well, your voice was a little bit muffled when you said, when you made your last comments. So I guess what you said was, what will be the role for communities, people at the grassroots, yes? Excellent.
Yes, that's correct.
So, but it's important that I make a few points, and I'll do that within my own 7 minutes or thereabouts, yeah? So the first is that my friend Ochuko, fantastic guy, I mean, we had this conversation in Akwa Ibom State in a workshop, and the moderator has said that my view is a bit extreme. It's not really extreme. It's actually more, it's actually realistic, right? Realistic, because I've gone beyond looking at this, at the paper, and the good doctor did raise some very valid points, which are excellent in this conversation, right? I can tell you for a fact that Nigeria's idea around net zero is not well thought out. Nigeria, and indeed most third world countries, have the habit of jumping into any slogan, right? Once upon a time it was CDM, we jumped on it. Then Red Plus, we jumped on it. We jump on these things without quite understanding what does net zero actually mean in a country like Nigeria. And if people set targets for 2050 for net zero, what does 250, the year 2050 for net zero mean for Nigeria? Okay, so, and the professor did mention this, and it's important to reiterate that there's clear disarticulation between the Nigerian government itself. There are horizontal and parallel disarticulations, right? And vertical disarticulations. So there is no communication between the local, the federal, and the state in terms of planning to the so-called net zero, in terms of addressing this thing. There's no articulation. Go to any state, even those exposed to the most extreme impacts of climate change, and ask what the plans are in terms of a net zero. There are no plans. Just the federal government has got plans that they're implementing. Now, even the federal government's own plan is faulty. So the climate change department has got a fairly decent plan, right? But turn to the energy sector and look at Nigeria's energy roadmap. It's still very fixated on fossil extraction and burning to generate power. Turn away and go to the Ministry of Petroleum and look at the new Petroleum Industry Act that we just passed. It says that 30% of all profits from NNPC will be dedicated to looking for more fossil fuel to burn. How does that work out? So Nigeria clearly does not understand. If Nigeria understood net zero, it will reflect in the PIA, it will reflect in our power map, everything it will reflect. And currently Nigeria doesn't know what net zero means, right? And I'm skeptical. Ochuko said that we shouldn't just keep backtracking the conversation, we should jump on it. I'm telling you, brother, we are having two different conversations. The global north is having another conversation from what we're having in the global south. We can't jump on a conversation. We have jumped on several conversations like this that led us absolutely nowhere. Okay, now back to the nitty-gritty. Net zero is based on offsets. And you want to know what net zero means for Nigeria. Net zero is based on offsets. It's based on techno fixes that take carbon out of the atmosphere. Where do you think, when these carbons are taken out, where do you think these projects will be implemented? Available record tells us that climate change mitigation scheme, offset schemes, are mostly, 90% of them are established in third world countries, places like Nigeria, right? Take an example, one such offset schemes I have studied, RED+, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, right? Where the largest expanse of pristine forest in Nigeria was dedicated to RED in 2008. I challenge you to go to the forest of Cross River State where RED is being implemented. What is going on there right now is the highest spate of deforestation going on in the world, an unbelievable level of deforestation. We have situations where communities were banned from entering their forests, where they were banned from expanding their farms, sustainably managing their forests. Land was grabbed from community people. The point is that these offset schemes, everywhere they have been implemented, whether in Uganda, in the Amazon, or in Nigeria, in Cross River State, deprives people of their livelihoods and rights. That's what net zero means. It means offset, and offset means land grabs, right? Now, another thing which the doctor, our only female colleague, the doctors raised in this conversation was around net zero and climate change schemes. Net zero focuses overtly on climate change mitigation schemes. It follows the global trajectory from the global north. 90% of climate finance goes into climate change mitigation, not adaptation. But what we need in Nigeria, in Africa, given the fact that we are already living with the impacts of climate change, desertification, climate-induced conflict, sea level rises, ocean encroachment, losses of livelihoods, given these facts, what we need more in Nigeria is not really mitigation, it's more of adaptation schemes. But the whole net zero concept turns the matrix that as a country, Nigeria, we're going to be targeting most of our resources, most of our energy, and most of our time chasing mitigation and not adaptation. How does net zero fix the livelihoods of the people of the Orashi region in River State that has been destroyed every year in 2 months of flood? How does net zero address that? It doesn't have any answer to that problem. And then finally, I know my time is out, yeah? Net zero as a concept is based on market mechanisms, market-driven mechanisms, paying for climate offsets. So let's talk in business, let's use business terminologies now, right? Climate change offset mechanisms, right, allows you basically, the simple term is that yes, you can pollute, but you need to pay to do so. It charges you for polluting. Basically, that's the thinking. That's the framework that you can offset your pollution. Which companies in a global world, comparing companies in the global north and the global south, which companies do you think can actually afford to pay to offset their pollution? Which companies? 99% of the companies who can pay to enjoy your net zero theory are companies in the global south, in the global north rather, and companies in the global south have no opportunity to enjoy from your net zero. And then back to the discussion you raised about local communities in the Niger Delta region. I work with these communities, and I know that for these communities, the most pressing issue for them is not your net zero. The most pressing issue for them is how to adapt with the impacts of climate change that they are currently living with. These are the issues. Food, agricultural produce is declining. In even a local government area where I was a few days ago, a place that Exxon has extracted crude oil from for over 60 years. I saw sea level, ocean level encroachment up to 30 feet inland, ocean coming inland. Yeah, of course. So we see these people are living with the impacts of climate change, and net zero doesn't solve their problem. I think that Nigeria should rechannel this thinking and focus more on supporting people to adapt to climate change rather than face, chasing a global illusion called net zero.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. I'm not a referee, I'm just moderating. So needless to say, Ochuko, I'm going to pass the mic to you, but I want to say I see a lot of questions in the chat box. Keep them coming, and we'll bounce it around with our three resource persons, Ken Henshaw, Ochuko, Odibo, and Habiba Daggash. But Ochuko, the mic is yours now.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very wonderful. Ken, I'm always happy to have you, and we'll talk. Does anybody remember COVID? For me, a certain time, some years back, we thought the world can never be shut down. COVID taught us different. Some time ago, myself, Dr. Tafa, Okereke, Adebote, we joked about shutting the world down for one day and see how much emissions will be reduced. The world was shut down for over a year. I don't believe in the word impossibilities anymore. Everything is possible. So, Habiba, Ken, I'm with you. I'm very pained to see that we're going through a lot as a country. But I'm happy Dr. Tafa is here, and he will tell you stories that we as Nigeria, as a country, we've come from the Stone Age to where we are now. Once upon a time, Dr. Tafa and Dr. Adebote were the only ones running around the UNFCCCs, attending all the meetings, breaking their backs, falling ill just to get this done. He's here, and he can testify. We've come a long way from there. We've come a long way. Now we have thousands, hundreds of people attending the UNFCCC meetings. We have states that are informed. But just before Dr. Tafa left the Department of Climate Change, he set up using a toolkit for involving states in climate change. The Department of Climate Change has traveled through Nigeria, educating the states who are to go down to the local government level to educate their people. The federal government can't do everything. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not with the federal government right now, but I'm telling you, a lot has been done. I'm sorry about the RED Plus challenge, but truly, sometimes programs can get hijacked or misinterpreted. The policy issues, we have the policy. We have the policy for climate change, the ability to implement it, bringing everybody together into driving the process is where we are as we speak. We passed a gender bill recently, like Ken reminded me about the Petroleum Industry Act. Now, passing it is good. Implementing it is going on. Habiba spoke about the LPG and the CNG. I believe it's a start. It might not be able to get us to net zero, but the journey, as they say, of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. If Dr. Tafa remembers where he was and where we are now, I'm drawing you out, Dr. Tafa, to tell the people in this group.
So much pressure on the retired man.
I'm putting him on, I'm drawing him on because we need him to tell us some stories of how he suffered, what he went through, and compared to what we are enjoying today. Nigeria has gone far. We've done a lot, and we can do more. I sometimes think when we say land grab, a lot of people don't understand what land grabbing is. So they use the word loosely, but I think there are so many projects under the green bonds, so many projects that can come up after that, and it's working. It's a work in progress. We might not have a magic wand to just turn Nigeria into the UK. The US and other Western countries already have infrastructure in place, so they might have it easy for them. We might need more infrastructure, more funding, and more political will, like what Prof said. But I will say this, we have moved from 0 to 1. And like a friend told me, that is the longest distance in any mathematical equation. From 1 to 10 is going to be short. So discussing it is moving from 0 to 1. I believe
I'll just jump in. Sorry, I just have to jump in here. I would have put you on the spot on a few other things where you talk about using some terminology loosely. I also wanted to ask you about the market-driven mechanisms. It's one of the points that Ken Henshaw raised. There's a lot of narratives around carbon capture these days also, and these are things that have been tied to net zero. So many questions to be asked, but in the last 1 hour, 30 minutes, we've provided quality responses, quality insights to the concept of climate, of net zero, of course, under the framework of climate change. If Dr. Tafa would allow, I would like to welcome him, but I first plead from all the resource persons that you afford us a few more minutes. I was thinking we will be able to round this off at 12:30. It's 12:30 right now, but if you would please afford us a few more minutes, I would love to invite Dr. Tafa to give some comments to some of these issues. I see a lot of questions in the chat box. I will read them and then we'll round off. So Dr. Tafa, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you.
You have been muted, sir. You may have to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Clearly,
okay.
Sir. Welcome.
Well, once more, just a great pleasure to participate in this great conversation. It is true that we have come a long way in putting in place structures, functional structure for tackling issues of climate change. Sometimes in 1992, when the climate change framework was put up for adoption by countries, it was a total abstract for us in Nigeria because of the lack of understanding for what the issues of climate change were all about. We only had one person that was given that task to drive the process. But I want us to reflect back for all of us that have been participating in this issue of national conversation around climate change, to really reflect back and look at the journey so far. Government has actually put in place policy measures, which is the instrument that is required to galvanize action. For the number of persons that are participating in this conversation today and even subsequently, it is based on the policies that government has put in place. We also have various governance structure, which is very essential. The Department of Climate Change started just as a unit, but it grew and became a special climate change unit, and then it is now a full-fledged department. Furthermore, there's even a council, which government has already passed and awaiting operationalization. What of legislation? If you looked very much also, the legislators, it is only climate change that has both the chair and the Senate and in the House that are looking specifically on issues of climate change. So it is the level of understanding now that is coming on and the awareness. What of financing too? The funding that has come into issues of climate change keeps on increasing by the day because the members of the National Assembly that appropriate resources are clearly understanding the significance of it. I had Ken Henshaw talked about the political will. We have never had it this good under this present administration. I'm not in government anymore, but I can say it confidently that wherever Mr. President goes, he talked about issues of climate change, and he has already opened the pathway for us. It's left for us to key into it and do the needful from all angles. Stakeholders' participation too There's wide understanding, wide participation now across board, including even the states. We have put in place a framework, like Ochuko has said, for the states to participate actively in it. But it requires sustainability in that. One thing that I will agree that is really lacking is the need to have a roster of national experts on issues of climate change, and to continually have this conversation. We have tried to put in place a trust fund for climate change, whereby that resources can help us in conversation, in creating or in infusing ideas into all the government policies. Just like you said, the petroleum bill or act that has been passed, why didn't we have the ability to inject this aspect of climate change into it? I know now, presently as I'm talking, there's conversation going on in getting issues of climate change into the annual budget formulation, so that every project that is going to come from various government entities have to have some green thinking around it. If we succeed in having that, then it is a move in the right direction. For the net zero, let me round up by saying that on aspect of the net zero, I totally agree that we should be on board. We cannot be onlookers because the world is moving and things are changing. We have to have a target which we have set for ourselves. It can be a moving target, but as it is, we must strive towards achieving that target. There are various programs and activities that are going on, but ability to bring them together and harness them. Let us not be working in silos. So let there be that think tank that will come about through the formation of the roster of experts, through stakeholder conversation continually, and through that kind of approach and funding that is going to come not only from government, but from every sector that will get, including the international climate finance. I heard someone said that most of the resources are going to issues of mitigation. It's because it is futuristic. We're trying to reduce the emissions so that through that, we'll be able to meet the targets that we have set, both in the NDC and also in the climate change conversation general. But for Nigeria, the priority still remains adaptation. And it's left for us as stakeholders to take on board activities that should be funded through fundings, like in the adaptation fund. It's unfortunate that till today, Nigeria has not submitted a single project to adaptation fund for funding. There's a lot of resources there, but why can't we come together, put our heads together, and come up with a national project which we can forward to the adaptation fund? So a lot has been done, and we should not just always continually say that there's no thinking going on in government. Thinking is there, and structures have been put in place, both policy, both finance, both legislation, both capacity building. We have institutions at the universities that has been set up purposely on aspect of research on climate change. So a lot is done, but there's still a lot to be done going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tafa. Thank you so much indeed.
Like I said, Dr. Tafa, sorry, I think there was something with my audio, but thank you very much indeed. And we really do appreciate this insight. I think one thing I will take away, I will think about before I sleep, is the fact that Nigeria has not submitted a single project for adaptation fund in the last 20 years or so that we've been a part of the UNFCCC, we've been a party. It's quite worrisome. But let's hope that with these conversations like this, and with the recommendations of you saying we need to form that think tank, Prof also said we need to bring the best brains together to make a difference. At this point, I just want to say thank you again to everyone that has joined from different parts of Nigeria, Kaduna, Lagos, Abia, and those joining from outside the country. Thanks, Happiness and Johnny joining from the UK, Kama joining from Italy, Annie from Germany, Issa from Japan, Mary from England. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate that you've spent this time with us, listening and learning. I must also thank folks from the Ministry of Environment. I see a number of them, Cynthia and Margaret from Nostra. I see Dolapo John also on the call, and a few other people whose names I may not be able to mention. Happiness, you mentioned earlier that you're hoping to learn about decarbonizing the energy systems in Nigeria, and I hope with these conversations, you have some clearer insights about that. There are also a number of questions on the chat box, but I would take maybe just 2 of them, and any of the resource persons can take a shot at it. Again, I want to say thank you, especially to the resource persons, Habiba Daggash, Ken Henshaw, and Mr. Ochuko Odibo. Professor Chukwumerije left a few minutes ago, but we'll just, any of the 3 resource persons can simply respond to this. The first question I will take is from Edum. Where is it? It's just in a bit. She was asking something around the ecological funds. Okay, I'm just going to take this from Ifeanyi very quickly. I have a question to ask. How vulnerable is our net zero strategy to changing geopolitics? And then it goes on to give a case in point, the Russia-Ukraine war, and is asking, where do we fit in the accounting scenarios for all this? I'll repost that question in the chat, so any of the guest speakers can take a shot at that. Where do we fit in all of the accounting scenarios in all of this? The other question I wanted to take, that's a mistake. The other question I wanted to take is from Edom, where is it now? A lot of questions, a whole lot of questions coming here. Zainab Dati, Habiba, let us see. Okay, I'll take this from Mohammed Isa, who is joining from Tokyo, Japan. With globalization, population increase, geopolitics at the cusp of the 4th industrial revolution, is net zero realistic? How do we balance the dual challenge for the need for more energy and less carbon, considering that we have high energy poverty rates? That's a question from Mohammed. I'm just going to rule out all the questions so you can, and I will repost them in the chat. So any of the resource persons can think about it and take a shot at answering any of the questions there. The next question will be from Goto Doc. Nigeria is a blind follower of international policies. Until our policy regulations are formulated on realistic scales, we are basically carrying out activities that cannot help Nigeria, rather will continue in a vicious cycle. That's from Goto Doc. Let's see if I can take a few more. Richard Abubakar Umar, we responded to your question earlier about involving governors and local government chairmen to carry this out. So does any of the speaker want to give a thought, respond to this?
Perhaps I can respond to the question about geopolitics, which
Great.
Is that just to say that I think it's Ifeanyi's question. Yes, it reinforces my point about the importance of having flexibility in determining how you can chart your energy transition pathway. Because it's France, Germany, or the UK that, because of this geopolitical energy crisis, not having access to gas from Russia, in a lot of cases, they've been able to restart gas plants or restart coal plants that are already existing to be able to meet up the winter demand for energy because of the shortfall that they're going to have from Russia. They have these resources at hand. They've already built out this infrastructure. What I'm saying is that if we don't, in a similar, let's say, geopolitical climate, or where there's some kind of disruption to the energy market, where we suddenly don't have access to a particular resource, it would be important to have another to fall back on. So if we go about where we're so restrictive in terms of determining the type of energy infrastructure that we build out, say, for example, going for renewables alone, or cleaner forms of energy that are being advocated for, without having some of these base load fossil fuel generation that's existing in the market, how do we have, why do we not have a similar flexibility to be able to determine what the cheapest form of energy is? We've seen that in times of crisis, they fall back to the status quo. Not that I'm advocating for them continuing to use fossil fuels, but it's something important to be able to even have that flexibility. And the way we are going about determining how to plan our energy system within the context of net zero, it seems like we're not giving ourselves a similar flexibility, which I think is unfair and inequitable within the general context of climate change.
Great, thank you very much. Ken Henshaw, do you want to make a comment also? Perhaps I can be specific to put forward this question about how the question is, we know how Nigeria is, so is it possible to meet the net zero targets without indigenous people suffering from such a plan?
I don't think we're going to meet those net zero targets. I think we're just going to get fatigued with the whole net zero thing, and then it will just fizzle away. Just like everything, Vision 2020 fizzled away, MDGs fizzled away, SDGs is fizzling away, everything, it will fizzle away, right? You know why? Because these were not our own thing. These were not homegrown. When will we have our own zero targets established by us, born out of our own realities? I don't think we're going to meet those targets, because you can see that, clearly from the conversation we've had here, it's just an attempt to tick the box. We're just ticking the box, so that we say, hey, Nigeria follow. We just want to be part of the conversation. We are there. We are also moving around. That's the reality. I think that what we need to do is very, very proactively stare our own challenges, our own climate change challenges in the face, okay? And, have some kind of summit and address our own problems. For example, I'll go back to Cross River State because I'm in Calabar at the moment, right? And I'm wondering, where did we get this strategy that market-based mechanisms could preserve the Cross River State forests? This is the largest remaining expanse of pristine rainforest in Nigeria. It was preserved by community effort for over, for several generations. Community people fought and kicked away loggers, even when the state government at the time were the ones logging the forest. People fought, kicked out logging, several logging companies were kicked out. But the instance you introduce market-based mechanism into managing the forest in Cross River State, what happened? We have the highest spate of deforestation going on. What did we do wrong? We adopted a strategy that wasn't homegrown, wasn't ours. What went wrong? We need to start looking at what our real problems are and craft solutions that are realistic and based on our own timelines and not what is handed down to us. Rather than net zero, right? I think that the poverty, the energy poverty, the economic poverty, and so on in our country gives us a rare opportunity to develop a new development paradigm. We have an opportunity to develop differently. We cannot develop in this using the same trajectory which the EU, the UK, for example, used with the Industrial Revolution and all that. We can't develop on those paradigms. We can craft a new, clean, and renewable paradigm. We are not even trying. We are not even trying. We are using what is handed down to us. And so, direct response to your question, I don't think we will meet it. I think we'll forget the target pretty soon. We'll just forget it existed.
Thank you indeed, Ken Henshaw. I see Habiba's hand is raised, and I would have just said you should round up, but you did a good job already, concisely, so I should say.
And I was also hoping I will have a say something.
But yes, I will just pass the mic to all the other speakers. I will end with you, Ochuko. Let's take Habiba first. Maybe Peter Tafa in 1 or 2 minutes or so can give his closing thoughts, and we'll round off with you, Ochuko. So, Habiba, what would be your closing thoughts, please?
Yeah, just a closing thought, just to round up on following up on what Ken has said, is that we need a national scale modeling effort where we map out some of these transitions, where we determine the indices that we determine the criteria for success. We want to undergo some kind of energy transition and take care of some of our environmental systems as well, ecosystems as well. We have to find a way to do that while improving centering human welfare in these transitions, whether that's land rights of indigenous people, ensuring there's innovation and job creation, ensuring that we're minimizing levels of pollution in certain states. But this is something that has to be an internal effort and is the path that government and academics and whoever is engaging within this space, we need this effort to be done. And I don't even think at a national level, at subnational levels where we understand the intricacy, the complexities of the different social and economic contexts that exist across the country. So I'll end on that note.
Habiba, I know you've ended, but this very important question from Chukwu, if you can respond in one liner, is saying, Habiba, what would be the largest block that we need to tackle to meet the net zero emissions? So what's like the biggest challenge that we must pull down and that will cause us to achieve the net zero emission?
Nigeria does not actually produce or use a lot of energy. A lot of the emissions come from land use change, and the forestry sector. So the actually best way to mitigate is if we can drive down the emissions through climate smart agriculture and afforestation and reforestation, because they make up, I think, 50, greater than half of the emissions from the country.
Concise, great. Thank you very much. Dr. Peter Tafa, I would ask you to unmute, and if you can, in 1 minute or less, just give some closing thoughts, please.
Thank you. Just what I would just like to say is that we are part and parcel of the global community, and we are not living in isolation. Any system that is adopted through a multilateral process is always subjected to national circumstances. If the Red Plus program has been found not to be working here in Nigeria, nobody is forcing Nigeria to implement it. We can modify it based on our national circumstances. But I just want us to understand some terminologies which the African Group of Negotiations keeps on bringing onto the table. One has to do with this aspect of survival emissions. Another one has to do, which is not only for the African Group of Negotiators, but it's a common thing that is being discussed within the UNFCCC process, the common but differentiated responsibilities. Let's look at our own national circumstances. What is it that we really want? If something has been brought down, nobody is forcing us to take it hook, line, and sinker, but we should adopt it based on our own national circumstances after revision by our own national experts. Nobody is telling you that you must go to the Green Climate Fund and collect resources from there to come and do activities. But it's because us, the developing countries, kept on telling the developed world that we are lacking resources. So such things were put in place to help the developing countries to go and get those kind of resources. So in the same vein, all the policies and measures that are adopted in the UNFCCC negotiations is with the full participation of developing countries, including Nigeria. We've gone there, and many a times we do take the conversation, or we take the inputs of even civil society organizations to form the national positions that we take to that place. But when we bring it back home, we have to have national conversation around it towards its implementation. If it's not going to favor us, then we jettison it and develop our own. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ochuko. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. What can I say after my boss has spoken? Yeah, Dr. Tafa hit the nail on the head. Now, Ken, back to you. I know I've always wanted you to say what you want to say because you are on the ground and you get to relate with these people. Well done for all your work. Habiba, thank you for the research and the data you've shared with us. But I will go back to some of these things. I'm happy you spoke about climate smart agriculture because that's what I'm currently doing. I'm working with the Nigerian Agribusiness Group and supporting the Ministry of Agric to have a framework designed by Nigeria, if I may say so, not by the FAO, not by any foreign body, to push for a system for implementing agriculture and looking at the emissions from that sector, and also reworking the business aspect of all of this. Going back to NDCs, nationally determined contributions. Now, we chose the sectors We chose and designed the NDC for Nigeria. The UN or UNFCCC did not do that for Nigeria. It's Nigerian design. They guided us, yes, but we did it ourselves. Some of all these projects like the Red Plus, we adopted, we did domesticate them, meaning we had consultants and we consulted with community people. Now, some things can go wrong. Vehicles can have accidents. Planes can fall from the sky. It doesn't mean that it was faultily designed. Some other things can affect this. So I'm trying to speak to every participant here, including other people that will watch this later, that net zero is possible and that, yes, there's geopolitics, but we can jettison it. If we find out it is not working, then we can drop it. Blind followers. We are not blind followers. We belong to the same international community taken from Dr. Tafa. And we have agreed, we have ratified. We can change it to suit national circumstances, whatever we have adopted. We can domesticate it. And if it is not working, we stop it. So I will conclude in this manner. We cannot go back. It's not an option. We have to move forward with this. We can look for a better way. We can form a community of environmentalist specialists and come up with ideas and go back to the government and say, this is not working and this is the way we think it will work. But we cannot stop working on it. That's how I'll conclude. Thank you very much.
And that is a very powerful way to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Odibo Ogenechukwu, for that. Really appreciate it. It's been a very insightful conversation. I mean, we've been discussing for almost 2 hours now. Sound conversation, really, really insightful. But one thing I can say is that there is no singular answer to this question. What does net zero mean for Nigeria? We've seen these 4 professionals in their various fields articulate different positions. Yes, we believe it is possible. How do we get there? What are the resources? We've put that out. And we'll follow this on with other series, and we hope that you'll be joining. I should also say we've been posting a message on the group asking you to take this conversation further online using the hashtag #NetZeroNG, and we'll be happy to take kick the conversation forward. Feel free to tag us and also follow us. It's at Climate Wednesday. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. You can also follow me at Adebotes. Feel free to put your social media handles also in the chat box so that we can engage with each other. Professionals like this, we must not just be speaking to ourselves. We must be able, it's important that we get other people outside our network to also be part of, to learn from our wealth of knowledge. So please do that. The recording of this conversation will be available 24 hours from now on our YouTube platform. We'll share the link on our social media platform. So please also look out for that. Our guest speakers made a bit of, they shared some links to some research that they've made. I am going to repost them in the chat box now, so you can refer to those links. Quite insightful report and research too. It's in the chat box now, so you can refer to them and digest them at your own timing. The recording of this, like I said, will be available. Please use that link we've put in the chat box to put in your details. We have some stipend that would like to pass across to you after the meeting. So please use that registration link to do that. I must say again, thank you so much for joining. It's incredible to see that this over 50 people joined and stayed through all the way to the end of this conversation. Thank you indeed. I'll pass it back to Olumide Idowu, where it's been an honor doing this. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote, and enjoy the rest of your day. Olumide, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, Seyi. Thank you very much. I don't want to repeat all the thank you, all the appreciation you've given today. I just want to say we are doing this just for us to understand the context of what we are facing coming 2060, as the government have made us to know that we want to meet our net zero. So, and I'm very happy that the kind of conversation we've had this morning, moving to this afternoon, has shown to us that the real answer is we need to know where we are and how to move forward, and how to make sure that the people at the receiving end actually need to be taken care of, because they are the one that has actually need this conversation more. And I want to say big thank you to everybody, all the speakers, Prof, Habiba, Mr. Ken, Mr. Ochuko, and most especially Dr. Tafa for joining us on this conversation and for bringing to our notice some key implementation, key action that the government have been working on for the past couple of years. Thank you so much, sir. And we look forward to have more discussion. So I just wanted to know that we are still taking this conversation forward. Stay connected, and we will share more of what we are going to be doing on this, because we just want people to understand that what does net zero mean for Nigeria? Everybody's talking about net zero. You know, it's very important that we start looking at the entry point for us as a country. We are one of the largest population across Africa. We are doing a lot. God has provided natural resources, everything we have. How can we harness this opportunity in building investment for a lot of people that actually need to hear or to listen to us? So thank you very much. And I wish everybody a great weekend ahead. Please try as much as possible. We are going to be sending you data for joining this conversation. Fill that link and let us see, let us have your details as well. And so thank you, Seyi, for moderating this session. And we'll see you in a couple of days for another conversation on this series of net zero. Thank you and have a blessed day. Bye. So we are going to leave this conversation for another 3 minutes for people to fill the form with the link. Then we close the Zoom. Thank you.
Yeah, I also want to say I've allowed participants to also have the ability to unmute themselves. If you want to say thank you or goodbye, feel free.
Ah.